It was a cloudy afternoon in the small village of Ogbomoso, where traditions were low and shame spread faster than the harmattan wind. A teenage girl named Adiz knelt behind her family compound, clutching her swollen belly, her face streaked with tears and dust. She was 9 months pregnant and in labor, but she wasn't allowed inside. Her cries echoed through the compound, but the doors remained shut. "Let her scream," hissed her aunt, standing by the veranda with arms folded. "She brought disgrace to this family. She will give birth like the animal she behaved like." Inside the house, no one dared speak up. Her mother, broken and voiceless, sat in a corner, praying silently with trembling lips. Adiz's father, a stern church elder, had declared her pregnancy an abomination since she refused to name the boy responsible. In truth, she was hiding something far worse, something that would tear apart everything they thought they knew. Just 2 months ago, Adiz had returned home from boarding school, withdrawn and quiet. She no longer laughed. Her uniform hung loosely over her frail body, and her eyes told stories her lips refused to speak. Her mother asked, her grandmother begged, but she stayed silent. So when her belly began to show, accusations filled the compound like smoke. Her father demanded answers, threatening to disown her. Still, Adiz kept her secret locked behind tearful silence. And now, beneath a mango tree, with only a torn wrapper spread on the ground, she screamed as her body convulsed. The chickens in the yard scattered. No midwife was called. No water boiled. Her young cousin, barely 13, stood nearby with a rusty basin. The humiliation was deliberate. In the eyes of her family, she didn't deserve dignity. But nature doesn't wait for justice. Within minutes, the baby came, a tiny, blood-slicked, and crying into the open sky. Adiz, drenched in pain and sweat, held her newborn and wept, not because of the pain, but because of the truth she knew would soon shatter everything. Her mother snuck out that night and held her daughter's hand in secret. "I believe you, Eda," she whispered, eyes red with guilt. "But you must speak. You must say who did this." Adiz only shook her head. The child was a boy. Fair-skinned. Sharp-nosed. And by the time of the naming ceremony 2 weeks later, the rumors had begun. The baby didn't resemble anyone from Adiz's family. His features stirred suspicion and fear. A visiting uncle offered to pay for a DNA test, disguised as a joke, but everyone knew he was serious. "Let the truth be known," he said, clapping his hands with a forced smile. Adiz stood still, arms around her child, her eyes fixed on the elder who'd just walked in, the man she avoided for months. What happened next would shake not only the ceremony but the soul of the village itself. The atmosphere at the naming ceremony was tense, far from the joyous event it was meant to be. Traditional drummers beat slowly in the background, their rhythms dulled by the weight of suspicion hanging in the air. Villagers gathered under a canopy, exchanging whispers behind painted fans and sunglasses. Adiz sat alone on a wooden bench, her newborn wrapped in a soft blue cloth on her lap. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm. The elder who entered moments earlier was Chief Duru, a man of respect, influence, and above all, Adiz's father's closest friend. He laughed heartily, shaking hands, pouring libations, and pretending not to notice how Adiz's eyes locked onto him with unblinking intensity. But those who watched closely saw the flicker of discomfort on his face. He didn't hold the baby. He didn't even come close. Then the uncle who had offered the DNA test stood and cleared his throat. "My people," he began, holding an envelope, "let truth guide us. Not gossip, not shame. This child deserves to know where he comes from. We all do." Silence. He opened the envelope slowly as eyes darted between Adiz and Chief Duru. "The test has been verified by a government clinic in Ibadan. It shows, with 99.99% certainty, that the biological father of Adiz's son is," he paused, tension thick in his throat, "Chief Ignatius Duru." Gasps ripped through the crowd. Some dropped their drinks. Adi's mother clutched her chest. Her father stood frozen, mouth agape. Chief Duru's smile dissolved instantly. Lies, he shouted, leaping to his feet. This is madness. That child is not mine. But his voice cracked. He knew. And Adi's? She didn't flinch. She only stood, lifted her child gently, and walked to the center of the crowd. You all wanted to know the truth, she said quietly, so here it is. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. He would come to my school. Pretend to check on my father's donations to the chapel. He'd bring me food and threaten to stop paying my fees if I told. I was 14. She turned to face Chief Duru. You watched me suffer. Watched me bleed in that backyard like I was nothing. But you knew the truth. You knew. No one spoke. A chicken clucked in the distance. Chief Duru's wife fainted on the spot. Adi's father broke down in tears. Forgive me, Eda, he whispered. Forgive me. I didn't know. But forgiveness is not always so easily earned. The crowd dispersed slowly, ashamed, disturbed. Chief Duru was arrested within days as the case became public. The story spread across radio stations and social media, shaking even the neighboring towns. In the weeks that followed the DNA revelation, the village of Ogbomoso transformed. The same people who had jeered Adi's now crossed the road in shame when they saw her. Her father resigned from his church post and spent most days seated outside his shop, silent, aged by regret. But Adi's, she held her head high. Support poured in from women's rights groups in the city. A lawyer took up her case pro bono. Chief Duru, despite all his wealth and power, could not escape the storm. More girls came forward, students, housemaids, even distant relatives, with stories of the same man, different places, same shame. The police couldn't ignore them anymore. Adi's moved into a shelter run by a local NGO, where she received counseling and enrolled in virtual classes. Her baby, whom she named Chikamso, meaning "I God knows my heart," began to thrive. His laughter became her strength. One morning, a social worker asked her, "Do you regret keeping the child?" Adi smiled. "No. He reminds me that even when they treated me like a dog in that backyard, I brought life into the world. And that life is innocent. Beautiful. Mine." Months later, a court ruled in Adi's favor. Chief Duru was sentenced. Her testimony, unwavering and clear, had moved even the hardest judge. He lost his titles, his investments, and whatever reputation he had built on silence and fear. But this wasn't just justice for Adi's. It became a turning point for her community. Conversations began. Girls were encouraged to speak. Schools invited counselors. And parents, especially fathers, learned to listen. At a women's conference in Ibadan, Adi's stood before a large crowd. "My name is Adi's Nkem," she said. "I was silenced, shamed, and left to bleed. But today, I stand whole, not because they believed me, but because I believed in myself." Applause filled the hall. And later that night, as she nursed Chikamso to sleep, she whispered, "You will never be a symbol of pain. You are the proof that truth can rise, even from a backyard." In a world where victims are often blamed, and predators walk free under the cloak of power and familiarity, Adi's story reminds us of the cost of silence and the power of truth. Every community must protect its daughters, not by controlling them, but by believing them. Because no child should ever be born into shame, and no girl should ever give birth where dogs rest.